Thank you very much, Cahirlach, and thank you and welcome to the House, Minister. Minister, next week, yesterday, there was an informal meeting of the World Trade Organization's TRIPS Council, and next week there will be a formal meeting at which they will be deciding on a proposal for a temporary TRIPS waiver on intellectual property rights for COVID-19 vaccines, which would allow Global South countries to scale up production and access to vaccines. And this is a proposal which has been brought by the World Health Organization and over 100 countries. I'm asking you, Minister, the position that Ireland is taking on that decision and the advocacy and engagement we are having with the European Commission on the position that they will take at that crucial meeting in April 30th. A month ago, we heard the head of the World Health Organization, months ago indeed, we heard the head of the World Health Organization warning us of the dangers of catastrophic moral failure. We know from Oxfam that nations with 14% of the world's population had 53% of the vaccines, but the distribution of vaccines is not the really crucial issue. The really crucial issue here really is the fact that there is a limitation on supply. And that limitation on supply is not natural, it is a choice. It is a choice to limit the manufacture and supply of COVID-19 vaccines to ensure and to protect profits. It is an artificial scarcity and it is a choice. And that choice is having a consequence. Because around the world, we have seen now, deaths are escalating. In India, there were 2,000 deaths yesterday. In Brazil, there were 2,000 deaths yesterday. In India, by the way, with those 2,000 deaths, just 1% of the population have been vaccinated. Those are choices, and people are dying, and they are dying younger, and the consequences are more severe. And it is important to note that the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Foreign Affairs and Defence, in their report on the distribution of COVID-19 vaccines for developing countries, were really clear. If we don't provide equitable access, it will prolong the pandemic. They also explicitly identified the TRIPS waiver as a mechanism which we should be supporting, especially given that a similar waiver was very important and crucial in combating AIDS and HIV in the past. And it's also important to remember that while a huge portion of the world's population remain vulnerable to COVID-19, those are ideal grounds for the virus to develop new variants. It is a grounds for experimentation for the virus, and those new variants will affect all of us ultimately. Many scientists are saying it could be 6 months or a year before there is a variant that is resistant to vaccines. That is unless we remove the access to a huge portion of the world's population for this virus and its variants, something we can do and can choose to do if we scale up global manufacture of vaccines. And just to know where the money for developing these vaccines came from, a huge portion of that was public investment. The AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine, 97% public funding. Moderna, majority public funding. The Pfizer-BioNTech, 500,000 to $500 million from Germany alone for that vaccine. The public have invested in these vaccines and they must now be treated as a public good. And this is crucial. This is one of the key moral decisions we will ever face. Minister, there are structures in place through the COVID Technology Access Programme run by the World Health Organization to ensure an appropriate, proper mechanism for the sharing of access, for the sharing of the rollout of know-how and technology. That is there and waiting. There is a demand from more than half the world for us to take the action. Can you tell me two very quick things? At yesterday's informal meeting, what position has Ireland pushed for on the TRIPS waiver? At the meeting on the April 30th, will Ireland be advocating for support for a TRIPS waiver, and will we be contacting the European Union Commission to ensure that they take that position? Minister, I hope that you are able to tell me that we will be doing the right thing.
Thank you, Senator. Minister, firstly, thank you for your cooperation with the change slot, and you have up to 4 minutes in reply.
Thank you very much, Cahirlach, and thank Senator Higgins for raising this topic and affording me the opportunity to address the House on this hugely and timely issue. I've listened carefully and agree with many of the points that Senator Higgins has raised. The Senator will undoubtedly be aware that international trade is a competence of the EU under the treaties. In exercising that competence of the WTO, the European Commission engages with Member States, including Ireland, through a variety of committees and working parties, including on intellectual property. As you'll also be aware, the EU's current position on the proposed waiver is that the WTO International Agreement on Trade-related Aspects of Intellectual Property Rights, the TRIPS Agreement, allows countries the flexibility to respond to the concerns raised by the proposers of the waiver. Specifically, the TRIPS Agreement allows compulsory licensing, which is when a government permits an entity to produce the patented product or process without the consent of the patent owner. The EU has argued that globally manufacturing capacity, access to raw materials and the distribution networks are the main obstacles that need to be overcome. Increasing manufacturing capacity of vaccines may be better attained through voluntary licensing arrangement by disseminating the technology and know-how of those who develop the vaccines. To this end, at the EU level, the Commission has set up a task force for industrial scale-up of COVID-19 vaccine production. The task force is promoting partnership through matchmaking events, and one such event took place at the end of March and identified 300 companies in the vaccine supply chain, vaccine developers, manufacturing organisations and suppliers. The task force is having engagement regarding the global supply chains and aims to launch new production sites in the EU to maximising production capacity. I do want to highlight that while the EU position is that the intellectual property is not the primary obstacle to access to vaccines, and instead argues that manufacturing capacity, access to raw materials and distribution networks are the main obstacles that need to be overcome, it does acknowledge that increasing manufacturing capacity of vaccines may be better attained through voluntary licensing arrangements I'd therefore like to use this opportunity to strongly encourage pharmaceutical companies who have profited immensely, who have benefit from state investment, to show leadership and seriously consider such licensing arrangements and voluntarily take the lead on this. Having said all this, this is not to say, as a country, we do not have a responsibility to speak out of what we believe is right. And as other countries have reviewed their position, it is incumbent, in my opinion, that we review ours with new emerging information. It is a critical issue, and it is morally right to ensure we have a fair and equitable system. I'm firmly of the belief that no one is safe until everyone is safe. The past year has shown us the necessity of working together towards a common goal, and that through collaboration we can succeed in suppressing this virus. As a country, we have always been world leaders in helping vulnerable people, and an inequitable distribution will lead to parts of the world falling behind. In an interconnected and global world, this is just not feasible. I therefore believe that as a government, we must feed back our concerns to the EU and the working groups, and I certainly will take the concerns that have been articulated so passionately by Senator Higgins today back to Minister Coveney and Minister Varadkar.
Thank you, Senator Troy. Senator, you've up to 1 minute now to reply.
Minister, the intellectual property which needs to be waived is not simply about the patents, as was suggested under the existing TRIPS structure. It is also about the intellectual property in relation to the manufacturing know-how. And with respect, the World Health Organization, UNAIDS, the people who have worked on previous global health crises, they tell us that the TRIPS waiver is something that is needed. And I believe we need to listen to them. We're all very proud of Michael Ryan in the World Health Organization and his work. Let us now show that we listen to them as global experts and that we provide. Minister, it is absolutely crucial that the decision on April 30th is to support a TRIPS waiver. And if it is not, let us be very clear, that is a moral failure. And it is not sufficient that we replace a politics of principle with a politics of patronage, where we might matchmake you with a few other people, or we may have voluntarism from companies, and we might see if some country could get another country to talk together. That is a piecemeal charity approach to what is a matter of global, collective human rights and health priority. I really urge you, Minister, and I hear that you are hearing me, but just to be clear, the world will be watching on April 30th.
Thank you, Senator Higgins. Okay, Minister.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. But I just want to reiterate what I said already. I do acknowledge that this is a critical issue, and I do believe it is morally right to ensure that, regardless of where you are in this world, that you have access to a vaccination. That we need to have a fair and equitable system. And I firmly believe, and the government firmly believes, that no one is safe until everybody is safe. And apart from being the moral and the right thing to do, from an economic perspective, it's the right thing to do as well. Because by protecting one half of the world while leaving the other half of the world behind is not going to do any good for anybody. So we do have a role to play. It is a competency of the EU, but we have channels in which we can feed our concerns into, and I believe as a government we need to do that. We need a fair and equitable distribution of our vaccination process across the world, and I think our government has to stand up and ensure that that happens.
Thanks.